Today we are going to have ourselves a lesson on moral equivalency and media literacy. Two things that the modern day progressive left have in desperately short supply, as it turns out. As I'm sure you've all seen this picture before, media literacy, the evil Nazi Starship Troopers, bad, brown people, the arachnids, good. As Starship Troopers has been a entity the left has twisted itself into absolute pretzels over again and again in a desperate attempt to explain why the genocidal, non-communicative bugs whose only actions against humanity have been to attempt to eradicate them from the galaxy are somehow the good guys, whereas the Terran Federation, who have attempted to avoid war up until one of their cities got wiped off the map, are somehow the bad guys. It's been one enormous L factory for the progressives, and they simply can't stop coping about it. To the point that now, I have been told by far too many people on Twitter recently that this guy right here is basically the moral equivalent to this guy, who's carrying a screaming demon-infested baby on his belt whilst carrying a severed head. Ah yes, no sane individual could possibly detect some sort of moral difference between these two handsome individuals, definitely not, as this of course has to do with Trench Crusade. It originated from a bit of a shower thought that I had in the middle of the night. Namely that Trench Crusade, as we've talked about previously, is a setting where the demons are on the verge of victory. Humanity is barely holding on. The entire world is riven by invading hordes, and any day, humanity's light may be extinguished. And yet the map they released looks like this, where gold is Christianity, and those little dots of red you see all over the place, that's hell. That's the bad guys. This is all the unstoppable, unending tides, the torrential outpours of hell itself has managed in 900 years? Why are we afraid of them again? That's a genuine question. Or even better, why hasn't Christianity simply rolled over these isolated, silly little outcroppings of hell here? Why don't we just crush this? Why don't we just retake Gibraltar? And the only reason why we can't retake Avignon is apparently because, whilst we were able to defeat the literal incarnation on Earth of Beelzebub, we can't take his city. That's just too hard. His actual reflection in the mortal world, sure, but not a city. What do you think we are, superhumans or something? And yet, of course, again, the lore keeps stressing that the good guys are losing, that hope is almost out, that everything is terrible. So I was like, okay, but that's not true. I had an entire stream just complaining over this very fact until it hit me, hold on, what if the good guys are actually losing? What if in the minds of the creators, the developers, in their subconscious, they're conflating who the good guys are? Because if we flip the colors on the map, suddenly this looks like a world in danger. This looks like a Christianity on the brink of annihilation. This looks like a world on the edge of collapse. Suddenly, this feels perfectly into the law. There are battlefronts everywhere. Humanity is barely holding on in desolate outcroppings against an irresistible horde. Now, again, I don't think the developers of Trench Crusade did this intentionally. I simply think that, as leftists, they naturally identify with evil against good, as in this case represented by Christianity. And well, we have a statement here from one of their moderators, literally yesterday when this was taken. So there is a clear good and evil in Trench Crusade, says Pilgrim Walter. And then the moderator chimes in, no, that is not correct. In a war between the literal forces of absolute, unequivocal evil, ontological, spiritual, natural evil, and God, there is no clear good and evil. Again, My theory is making a lot of sense, isn't it? And the developers again have also stated repeatedly that Trench Crusade is not a Christian setting. Despite, again, Christianity and God being literally the only salvation that humanity has, yet it is not pro-Christian. So I wanted to go through some of the arguments we've seen here, like this one. I mean, just because there are demons doesn't mean humans cannot be bad. That'd be like saying 40k is clear good versus bad because chaos exists. And you know what? More and more I am entirely on board that train. The Imperium is not evil. The Imperium is good, simply because it wishes for the survival of humanity against endless hordes of genocidal aliens and literal evil gods. But to bring this back to Trench Crusade, just because there are demons doesn't mean humans cannot be bad. This is utterly irrelevant. Utterly 1000% irrelevant. The argument basically boils down to, yes, the literal forces of absolute evil are real, and they are trying to destroy the world, but Christianity can still be mean. I don't care. I don't care. It's utterly irrelevant. Over there, we have a creature that literally feeds off pain and suffering, that masturbates with buckets of blood of the innocent. I don't give a shit if we have to be mean to one another to defeat him. That is utterly irrelevant. We are no longer in a human moral system here. We are no longer in a system where I'm a bit mean to my neighbor and you aren't, so you're better than me. We are in a system where absolute, unfeathered, destructive evil competes with humans. There exists no moral equivalence. There exists no bad in comparisons to absolute evil. Any and all actions, no matter how morally heinous, taken in opposition to absolute evil, is absolute good. Hell, this is the leftist argument that's been repeated for decades now. However, whereas we are using it against actual demons, they're using it against other people. The left have long since defined themselves as the only holders of moral good in the West and in general, and therefore are allowed to simply assault people if they hold differing opinions. There's this one. Bro was told the setting had no good guys, decided to cope by deciding it means the devs meant the bad guys are the good guys, as they absolutely did, and wrote a 2-page fanfiction about the dev beliefs to cope. No good guys shouldn't be a hard concept for a 40k player. This is yet again this one. No, this is a good guy. I don't care if his rifle is constructed by child laborers in the factories of Antioch, okay? I don't care if every bullet needs to be blessed with the tears of a crying widow. I don't give a shit if they're recruiting 12-year-old boys to go to the front line, because this is the enemy. And I want to point out too, the least soldier of hell, the least of all the moral servants, the loyal servants, the soldiers, the foot soldiers, the heretic legionnaires, have to travel to within sight of the gates of hell. It is stated in the law that only those with the blackest, most depraved and evil heart can do so. This guy right here is Hitler. ×2, that has no moral compunctions at all about committing any crime. In fact, committing the most heinous, most deplorable, obscene crimes against God and nature imaginable is his bread and butter. That is the basis of his ideology, which is why he's carrying a cursed, severed head, probably still alive at this point because demons, and a tortured baby carved with markings of the devil into his very flesh. I don't care how bad this guy is. He could be a straight-up fascist stormtrooper for all I care. This is so much worse, there is literally no comparison. And in that case, oh yes, there is absolutely the good guys, the absolute good guys. See, this is also what the developers don't understand. If you create a setting where you have absolute evil, you will also, by simple definition, have absolute good. Because anything you do against that evil is good. Let's see here. And again, I am so getting on board with this idea of 40k. I am so on board with this now. Does the Imperium do terrible things? Oh, absolutely. It does horrible things. It destroys entire planets on a whim on occasion. But compared to that enemy, yep. No, they're the good guys. Screw you very much. And again here, so these guys wearing infernal imagery don't strike me as the good guys. And now we're going to what about a little bit again. And these do. Yep, absolutely. He's wearing cross right there, and he's covered in sacred imagery. And he's nailed like hands to his shield. Don't care. There is no moral equivalence between this and Mr. Baby on Belt Man. Doesn't exist. Or this one, okay, a penitent who has flagellated himself and mortified his own skin, presumably in order to drive away his sins, I guess, as he suddenly looks like a flagellant. Or this one here, ecclesiastic prisoners, Trench pilgrims. So this, in all due likelihood, then is a captive taken. He is given a big old bomb to his back with a detonator and told to go towards the enemy. Why? Because if he dies murdering them, at least there's a chance his soul will go to heaven. And in a world where we know heaven is real, yep, you're doing him a favor. You are actually doing him a motherfucking favor at this point. Okay. Again, I want to point out, in this world where we know God is real, where we can speak to God, if God tells us that, oh yeah, no, if you set a witch on fire, if you burn them to death, that will actually purify their soul. Burn them. All of them. Every last single one of them. It's a morally good act to do so, because you go to heaven instead of, downstairs. It is all relative to the universe itself. And again, the what about it? Or maybe it's a Christendom has become something more akin to the religion of the Aztecs, except they haven't at all. And the force of hell rarely have the actual presence of demons, meaning as human fighting as humans. Again, whataboutism and or simple ignorance of the Lord. As I mentioned already, even the least foot soldier of hell is the most sadistic, darkest-hearted, brutal motherfuckers in the entirety of humanity. Each and every one of them is a straight-up Totenkopf camp guard, okay? Each and every one of them, every single one. On this one too. So, this one. Because they brought, but what about humanity does this? So this is a prophetic tactician. Part of the Synod of strategic prophecy, the Synod communicates directly with God. In order to divine his ultimate plan, in order to do this, the Synod must use children, who are the only ones with the sensitivity of mind to commune with God. The children are surgically, genetically, and chemically altered to carry out this task. They must also use special machines to communicate with God. So this is, of course, a child that has been torturously mutilated. It is a horrible, painful, no doubt fate that leads to a very, very short life. It is, in essence, a sacrifice, a martyrdom. Is this somehow morally justifiable? Yes. What do you want from me? You're fighting demons. God, again, this is what cannot be understood. From the left's perspective, the only absolute good is leftism. It's the only one. There can be no other forces, and anything that is even vaguely left, as in debaucherous, must be good in comparison to anything that they find as the opposition, even if that opposition is in a universe where literal Satan is struggling with literal God. If humanity's choice are get used as the fleshlights of Beelzebub, or do horrible things to survive, you do horrible things to survive. And you are 100% justified in doing so. No questions. And of course, there is also the blaming of the Crusaders. Don't forget that it's the Crusaders, the humanity itself, the church of this world essentially, that opened these gates. It's church's fault because, remember, Crusades were a political game for the church at the time, and here it cost them the world. Firstly, the Crusades were a defensive action. There's no question about it. The Islamists, the Muslims, were invading the Western world, threatening Western pilgrims, threatening Western lands. The Crusades were sent in to stop them from doing so. Secondly, there wasn't a church that opened the gates. It was a bunch of Templars that were corrupted by the demons. And even if we assume that it was the church, or members of the church that opened the gate, it again becomes instantaneously irrelevant the moment hell manifests on Earth. Any action of human greed becomes irrelevant against the forces of absolute ontological evil. That's all there is to it. You can criticize the decisions of humanity all you want. You can see that, well, within our modern-day moral matrices, this was pretty dickish, and it just doesn't matter. And again, the only reason why the Templars were, corrupted in the first place is, why? Because hell is real. I can't get over how they seemed constantly, ignore this unavoidable point. If hell is real, then hell is the ultimate evil. Hell affects the real world. That is the reason why the most terrible of humanity become enthralled to it. I mean, the whole thing is retarded from the perspective that they can clone Jesus and God hasn't just ended this shit. They treat God like he isn't God, and hell like it's morally grey faction. Now, that is also a perfect point here as well. God is presented in a very wishy-washy, roundabout way. Whereas hell, and I mean, they're not even presented necessarily as morally grey, it is that the progressive audience will go a mile out of their way to try and find some reason to justify it. Again, that is why it's a no good, guys. That is the justification. That is why you have people like this, and there isn't clear good and evil in Trench Crusade, even when you have actual ontological evil on the board. This is the leftist mindset. And that is exactly, yet again, why I think that my theory about the map is so correct. Because they don't understand their own thinking here. They write a world that is on the world of being outright doomed, that is barely holding on, that is marching towards doomsday at high speed, and yet they deliver a project that doesn't look like it, until you flip the script and suddenly it makes sense. I don't even think they're doing this on purpose, because bear in mind here, hell's reason for existence in the lore isn't actually to be hell. It's a plot device, that's all it is. It's like, oh my god, it's so scary, it's so incredibly dangerous. Oh my god, what has it done? Nothing. Nothing? For 800 years. Why? Well, because they're arguing in hell against each other. Okay, for 800 years? Yeah, because like time flows differently. Oh, right. So why does it never flow faster, incidentally? But it's just a plot device. It's the Eye of Terror, in essence. This source of all evil that is incredibly dangerous and one day will swallow the world, even as Abaddon the Despoiler leads his 13th failed crusade. But in this case, it is deeper than that. I do believe this is actually a beautiful vision of the subconsciousness of the creators, who themselves just straight up identify with hell, even if they can't properly intellectually recognize that fact. It is evident from their behavior, it is evident from their lore and how they engage with the setting and their fans. That is exactly what they are doing. The developers identify with evil. The developers don't see the obvious moral disconnect between these two individuals, and instead get obsessed about every minor crime committed in order to defend humanity against being murder raped to death in the 7th circle of hell. We've stepped far beyond merely identifying with literal bugs here. Like, defending the arachnids, oh, it is so much better than this. Bug posting cannot even compare to literal demon posting, which is where we are right now. Oh boy. The 2020s are an interesting period to be alive, isn't it? Once upon a time, we expected to be in flying cars right now, with genetically engineered cat girl, girlfriends, and VR. Instead, we're listening to people arguing for why Mr. Baby on Belt is the rough moral equivalent to the defenders of Antioch. Well, it may not have been the future we asked for, and yet, it's certainly an amusing one, nevertheless. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.